Welcome back to the Privated podcast, where we spotlight extraordinary people and remarkable talent reshaping our world. Our guest today is Saumya Bhatnagar. She's Forbes 30 Under 30 alum, co-founder and CPO of Involve.ai, and one of the top 50 most powerful women in tech. Samya has built her career at the intersection of product, engineering, and AI, helping companies scale smarter and predict customer needs with data-driven insights. She's also a Stevie Gold Entrepreneur of the Year award winner and a multi-time honoree among the top 50 women CPOs in the US. Her journey from building her first company straight out of a coding class in India to leading cross-functional AI-driven product teams in the US is a masterclass in innovation, resilience, and leadership. Welcome, Samya, to the show.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Yes, I'm honored to have you here. So tell us about the relationship between product and engineered, how that relationship evolved.
I think in the last 6 months, product and engineering has completely switched the way we used to function to what it is right now. Earlier, product and engineering used to be two separate organizations with two separate work structures and two separate ways of working. And there was a very tiny intersection, which we would all recognize as the handoff, where product would think up of something in a vacuum, not involving engineering, maybe at some moments involving engineering for like feasibility, but most of the times not. And then finally, at the end of a quarter, kind of just giving them a roadmap and a product requirement document. And then it kind of went away into the vacuum till the end of the next quarter to figure out, okay, what got built. So there was interaction every now and then, but I think it was very scheduled and with a very limited amount of agility, just because everybody had to focus on their functions. There has been a massive switch where the gap of technical feasibility analysis and understanding not just what we're going to build, but how we're going to build it has come into product's purview thanks to AI. Like you can literally now there's codecs available where you can just literally stick your Git repositories and product has a better idea of how things are built, what is feasible to build, how much time would it take, what effort it is to build something. So we have a lot more knowledge upfront to have actually very informed negotiations with engineering on things like timelines, on things like how something should be built, how quickly we can turn it around. And similarly, I think engineering, because of that, is understanding business strategy a little better. I think it's much more important for engineering to realize that feature A is more important than feature B because feature A is going to get you much more revenue or customer engagement or whatever that metric is. So I feel the gap is closing between the both of them. Now, thanks to things like Lovable and Cursor, product can literally vibe code, something to test. We don't need engineering resources anymore to build testable features anymore. You can vibe code something, test it with users, figure out if it's going to work or not, iterate on it, and then give a final refined version to engineering. And they already have a lot of the code to start off on. So I feel there is so much commingling that is happening that we're not product and engineering anymore. We are product development and engineering, like one big team that can function together without this, scheduled interactions. Now we're just working together in an agile manner.
Right. So before, product teams and engineering teams used to be think about two independent teams with a very limited subset of communication, right? Yeah, and now with vibe coding and the evolution of engineering, now we can see them as a single team with lots and lots of interactions and continuous feedback between each other, right?
Yeah, continuous feedback is like spot on. That's exactly what is happening.
Right. What do you think is the biggest misconception product leaders have about engineering teams today?
Good question. I think the biggest misconception is a a lot of the times a feature looks very easy to do and they're like, this should be done really quickly. And it really isn't, because product does not have a deep understanding of how the actual product is built. They understand the features, but they don't understand the, how the pipes actually are set up. So I think that is a very big misconception that product has about engineering. The other thing is, I feel like in the past, product and engineering have an inbuilt mistrust with respect to each other. Like, we always think that engineering is out to reduce things on the product roadmap, and engineering is always trying to think that product is trying to like add more than they can do. So I feel like there was a very inherent mistrust and a very easy scapegoat. So if something didn't work, product could very easily blame engineering, and engineering could very easily blame product. And there was this inherent mistrust that used to happen. So I feel like now, because everyone's on the same page, that is kind of shifting, where more trust can be built, everyone's on the same page, and everyone, in the grand scheme of things, at least knows the same amount. Like, it's not that I can validate. If you're an engineer and I'm a product manager, if you're telling me this is going to take me 4 weeks, I can validate it on my own to figure out if it is actually 4 weeks or not. So in a way, it kind of ends up building trust between product and engineering as well.
Right. I used to think that the intersection between product and engineering is application behavior, right?
Mm-hmm.
That product would say, okay, based on what we talk with users, we understand that this is the behavior that needs to be done, right?
Right.
And then on the engineering side is, I don't care about the user. Tell me what needs to be done, and I will build it. But what you're describing is a complete change on that
Right.
old mindset, right?
Right.
So now product is more involved on how it actually works.
Yeah. And I think the beauty of that is because if you think about it, even though both engineering and product are trained to be informed teams, the dashboards they're looking at are completely different. So product would be looking at user behavior, retention cohorts, where is drop-off happening, where are rage clicks happening, what are the UX gaps. That's what we look at, right, in terms of measuring. And what engineering looks at is availability, uptime, how long, concurrency requests, how is the database performing? Is the query optimized or not? So they're looking at very different data points than product is. And there is no interconnectedness or no way to explain the importance of a metric that is important to engineering to product, or the other way around. So now with AI, you can put all those data points, and it creates a much more rich picture for you to figure out actually what is happening. Because a lot of the times, I'll give you an example, we kept seeing drop-off on one feature, continuous drop-off. And me and my growth team were it was an important feature on our happy path journey, which is we want the user to follow these steps. So we're nudging this user towards this critical step, and we would get drop off within, I want to say, 2 minutes. And we would just keep racking ahead. So we updated the UX, we changed things around. We had no idea what's happening. And then somehow I ended up talking to our VP of engineering, who was looking at a different data set and said, the API call for this is taking way too long. And that turned out to be the same feature that we spent 2 quarters trying to optimize and re-optimize, but we didn't realize that it's an API call problem. So now if you put all of this data together, it'll give you a much richer picture of the true customer journey. Because now UX is not just about how the feature looks, it's how fast the feature behaves. Does it give the right outputs to you or not? Are the evals in the world of AI, are the evals and the benchmarks actually performing how we're expecting it to? Is there model drift or not? Is there data drift or not? And product earlier was not given this information for us to make informed decisions. So now when you can put this together with AI, both teams get very, very enhanced information to make even better judgment calls on.
Right, right. Yeah, I mean, I think that engineering focus more on efficiency, right? How fast it works, response time, right? Those type of things. And then on the product side is about effectiveness. Is the feature adding value to the users? Is this a good experience for the users? So I can see how integrating both teams into a single metric dashboard and helping them see the same things would add value for the whole product, right?
It tells a better story for sure.
Right. I've been teaching the team that I work with on the engineering side that we need to focus on understanding what is the value for the user, right?
Right.
I mean, we're not going to do the product owner job necessarily, but having an understanding of the whys. Why are we building this feature, right? And what is the value for the user, right? And ask more questions to the product owner to understand the whys, because that for the engineering side means that we have a much higher purpose, right? Because
Right.
now we understand that we're changing the life of the users, right? One way or another, right?
Correct.
And it is also that change of mindset of, if I'm building a test, am I testing based on the user expectations, right?
Right.
What is the expected behavior that the user would expect, right? And that because sometimes we get the feature, the requirement, but we don't understand the whys, and the product owner doesn't tell us, right? And we don't ask, right, on the engineering side, and that disconnect, right, makes that the feature that we build eventually doesn't make sense, right? Because we didn't understand the why, right?
Correct.
And that helped a lot, right? We haven't gone into this transformation that you're talking about, that is on these teams having the product and the engineering working together as a single team, although I've been working towards getting them working together, right? And the way that I've done it is, the bridge for us was the designer, having a designer working with the product owners, right? Because then the designer would not only build the mockups, which would provide more clear requirements for the software engineering team, but also would allow us to answer a lot of the questions, right? And before it is handed over to the software engineering team, the designer would work back and forth with the product owner to provide the clarity that the product owner might not have, right? Asking the questions, asking the whys, and working back and forth, right? So that way we can have this independence of, okay, when we're building something, we don't need to go back to the product owner every 5 minutes to validate something, because we have all the clear requirements and we can just focus on building, right? And then when we sit down about in order to understand a new feature and why it's going to be built in a specific way, then that comes back in a much more mature way, because now the product owner hasn't been like alone building or designing how the feature is going to be, right? It had somebody a little bit more technical to work with.
Correct. We always used to include, like in a product requirement document, we used to include like what is the core problem that the user has and why are we solving this? Like why is this problem the most important problem to solve instead of the others? So that forced the product owner also to really think about it, that why is this problem I used to call it, why is this the biggest fire? So I had it in my template. Problem out of all the fires, because at any given point there are like 8 fires that you're trying to like take out, and the user has a login issue and there's this other issue and that other issue. So out of those 10 problems that exist, why are we picking this one? And they had to write that in their PRD. And then what other solutions? Then there was like, I always used to force the product team to think about the first solution. I would say if you have the first solution out to a problem, it's always the wrong one. The first answer to any question is the wrong one. You have to think about 3 or more solutions to the same problem and pick the best one and actually do a pro-con analysis of why that is the best solution. So we would actually put our 3 solutions like in a very short form manner, because I know engineering teams hate reading a lot. It used to be like in a really like one-liner that we picked this solution, this solution, this solution, and this is the best one because of these reasons. And then they would start going like and doing like a deep dive into like the issues, into the solution of the PRD. And then in the end, I used to force them to write something called as a pre-mortem. And a pre-mortem is the opposite of a post-mortem. So we would say, if this feature fails, what would be the reason that it failed? So we would do it before we release the feature, or before. This is like the time we're giving the PRD. So it's not just thought of, but the team had to think about, if this feature fails, why would it happen? And we would list out all the reasons that we thought it could fail. So we would say, oh, it's because this is going to be like a high traffic feature, so we broke concurrency, or, the UX was very complex. So we already came up with these so that when at the time we're building tests, you're looking for these. So the QA team knew what to look for beforehand when the feature was delivered. So we had like this structure that we kind of tried to force at least product owners to write, because in my opinion, it's product owners who are responsible for everyone's vision of that particular module or feature. And if engineers are confused, it is the product owner's fault. It's no one else's.
Right. Yeah, because the clarity of the behavior should come from the product owners.
Right. Correct.
Yes.
And for that, the product owner has to be clear themselves. And I want to say like it's a 50-50, it's a coin toss. Because usually a lot of the times when we're building like this flurry of features, if you ask a product owner why this feature and why not that feature, a lot of the times I don't think they'll be able to give a valid response. So this forces a product owner to think that, is it really that important to build it? Like you're relying on ruthless prioritization. That's the only way you can build features and products of consequence, that what is not important. That is more important to know, that this I will not build as opposed to this I will build.
Yeah, we used to build these product requirements. Well, the product owners would build them. It was a very long document with a lot of text that would basically, the developers would just skim it, and then they would miss a lot of details, and then they kind of, miss the why, right? And sometimes it was not clear for the product owners, as you mentioned. That could be the case as well. So what we did to change that was we did some of that document, but with the designer, we build the mockups, and the workflow, and a lot of the requirements were on that workflow. So one thing I remember, and it's a very small thing, but still, always product owners will think on the happy path.
Right.
What happens if, there is a validation error on the form? Right? It took us a while to get to a point where we had in the requirement which are the required fields and why, right? But once we had that, then, okay, what are the errors? How should we tell the user that this is not, this is invalid, right? And there are many ways to do it. Get to a consensus on that. That took us a while. Eventually, we kind of had to we worked to standardize the error messages and the interface, so that kind of helped. But then, just getting the text of the error message, right, was something that the product owner would not think for themselves at first, right? So having the designer would ask that question before it was even presented to the developers, right? So that was a big, and it's a small thing, but represents.
It's a very important UX feature.
Right.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
And then from there, we start moving towards more and more clear requirements on the mockups, that the product requirement document became kind of obsolete. Yeah, secondary. Yeah. It was more of an outline.
Yeah.
And then the other thing we did is, once they had that document and everything ready, they would present it to all the developers, right? It was probably a bit inefficient because we had all the team for that, right? And we didn't know who was going to take that feature yet. But it was good because if somebody else was building something similar, then on the engineering side, we could say, okay, we can share the behavior, or we're going to build something similar together, or we already built something like that. We just need to take it and modify it to make this work, right? So that was good. And that reduced a lot all the miscommunication issues we had, and the engineering team was felt more empowered because now they had all the requirements at once. Like they had time to ask questions, and then they had time to, estimate it and build it. But now, I mean, the product owners are always available, but still, we didn't have the dependency.
Correct.
And oh man, that was a game changer for us, right?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I feel like that has also kind of changed on its head thanks to AI, where now you don't, because I know how long it takes to create a Figma design of the whole flow, which includes like if we have to show an error message, that's like another page and then another page, and you have to connect all of this with a hotspot. So now with things like Figma AI and Lovable and things like that, now a product owner can create the first version of the mockups and then hand it off to the designer without needing a PRD and say, hey, can you make this stylized? Can you tell me what the UX issues are? So the designer is doing the second layer of advanced work as opposed to building something, because most likely you already have a style guide. You already know what buttons are going to look like. You already know what placements of things are going to look like. So the product owner uses that to create a lovable design and then says, here is my vision. And then the designer comes in secondarily and then starts optimizing it for a good UX experience, where they say, okay, this form is very bad. Let's fix this. Or let's improve like this journey from this button to this page. And they come in secondarily. And then you don't quite need a PRD, because then you literally ask Lovable saying, hey, where could the error messages be? Where other gaps am I missing? And the AI validates it for you. And you have a complete mockup with code. So now instead of sending a PRD, you just send that Lovable file with, all of the design, all of the code, and the developers have everything that they need without having to think. Like, they can see the experience in front of them, so they know exactly what it is. And then we send like a tiny blurb going like the what, why, how, like the strategy, and then everything else is in front of them. They can actually like play around with it because it's a working prototype that you're sending, as opposed to a PRD or a mockup. So that empowers engineers in a huge way, because they're testing it out real time to go like, oh, okay, so this is going to pull from there and this is what's going to happen. And it becomes very iterative and much quicker because it's a working prototype.
Right. I mean, I keep talking about using the word dependency, right? That now there's no dependency between one team and the other. And I think it's an oxymoron because we're also talking about a higher integration of the team, right? And I think that both are true, because now the product owners can build a prototype, validate it with the users before it even touch the engineering side, right? With AI now, the product team can do that, and that's fascinating, right?
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't need to scale, doesn't need to, it's just a proof of concept that you can show the users and get feedback very quickly, right? And you can iterate that very quickly, right? And then on the engineering side, we can get that, and now, from the mockups, working with to build the initial mockups, send it to the designer, and then once we have that polished, then send it to the engineering team, right? But now they have a working prototype, they have mockups with a polished design, depending on what are the needs. But those are possibilities that we couldn't do that 2-3 years ago, right?
Yeah, absolutely not. Like, I would say not even 6 months ago, we couldn't do that. So it's changed so much, where you're right, it's both. There's independence and dependence at the same time, which is a very weird way to kind of put it, but that's what's happening. You are independent where, like, because I know how annoying it is for an engineer to like look through a PRD and start coding and then get stuck and say, okay, this use case is not covered and I need to build it right now. So then you're going to find someone to figure out what to do. And then you spend 2 hours trying to talk to that person and trying to communicate the gaps. So yeah, it's very annoying because it takes away time of truly coding. So how can you give the developer back that time to code with just headphones on and nobody bothering them? And they have clarity on what they're building. But at the same time, they're very integrated in the product building process. And that is the reason why they have independence to build. So it's both.
Yes, yes. And this usually when I talk about this, I think about, remember that episode of Friends where they had to get a couch into the
They're pivoting.
yeah, and everybody was like a little bit to the right, a little bit to the left, right?
Oh.
I feel it's like that, like we're holding a couch, on the engineering side. Now tell me, what do you want it? A little bit to the right, a little bit to the left. And there is an effort on keeping the couch up, right? There is an
Right.
effort, where we're building stuff. There is an effort, a sustained effort, right? So if we now have to stop because we have a very particular question that it's not clear when you just read the document at the beginning,
Right.
then that kind of we
Yeah.
get stuck, right? And it is frustrating on both sides, right?
Agreed. Because I know how it's like a double-edged sword on products and too, because I remember like what you're talking about. I've gone through this multiple times and tried to optimize this process pre-AI and pre-Lovable and Cursor and all of the fun stuff. But what I realized is it is impossible for one person to think about every scenario. There will be something that will be missing. And the more thorough you try to be, the longer that document becomes and the harder it gets to read and the harder it gets to kind of like truly like piece together. So it was actually like there was a point beyond which thoroughness actually reduced speed. So we always had like these, what we started doing in that time was we used to set up daily office hours where we're like, if you don't want to come, don't come, that's fine. But all product owners would be on that call for 1 hour. We would keep doing our work if nobody showed up. But if somebody needs to ask a question, they could like just jump on that call. And there was a point when we were really, really agile. We used to have it twice a day, like morning and evening, so that like whenever the developer works, we can work around their time. So anybody who had a question would hop on that call. They would go through the PRD going like, what the hell is this? Like, how are we supposed to think about this? And then we would like edit the PRD on fly. Like we would all be there, product team would discuss it with the engineer, talk about feasibility, update it, say, okay, done, and kind of go. So we were trying, so the goal became not to be extremely thorough with the PRD, but just have enough information. But then the goal became to unblock the developer as quickly as possible. So that kind of became the trade-off for us because I remember a PRD that I built that was like 8 pages long. No one's going to read 8 pages. Like even I didn't go back and read my own PRD because it was so long. So, but yes, I was very thorough, but after a point, effectiveness drops of the same PRD. So the length and the amount of information it captures can only be so much.
Right. We tried at one point doing it writing the tickets like contracts. If it is on the ticket, then you have to build it. If it's not, then you don't, right? As a way to kind of like from top to bottom, trying to, give more detailed requirements. But that eventually backfire because, as you said, it's impossible to think of all the possible scenarios. And then when we're building it, we realize one scenario, and then we can say, well, it was not on the ticket, so then I don't need to do it, right? So then the developers will become very explicit.
Right.
And there are many jokes around. And the thing is that created, crumbled the amount of value that product and engineering would be able to deliver to the users, right?
Yeah. But then that becomes the problem of you're trying to minimize scope creep because you said because we started with an original PRD and you said it's going to take 4 weeks. Now developers would come around to us and say, now you added this brand new scenario. This is going to take me another 3 days. So I can't turn it around in 4 weeks. Now what? So it's always like what I kept realizing is the PRDs are, at least now with all of this new technology, is a very outdated method of information transfer, because one human can't think of everything, and one engineer can't build everything and then stop, because they also want to provide value to the user. So at the end of the day, it's not about optimization of PRD. It is like, can we do something that scraps a PRD entirely? Because it's just a hard way to, and AI is the only way to solve that, like in my opinion.
Yeah, sorry. Yes, I think that AI now gives product owners much more tools. I think we were discussing this before the episode about how AI is empowering non-technical users,
Yeah.
non-technical people to build technical stuff, right?
Right.
And that's a game changer. Yeah.
Yeah, you still can't do it. Like, I feel like again, this is my very, very, what is that called? Unpopular opinion. But I feel it's going to be harder and harder for non-technical product managers to keep up in the future. You need to be technical, because just because somebody gives me a rocket doesn't mean I can fly it, I need to know enough about it, like just enough about it, like where the fuel is and how do you press start, and what if I'm up in space and something blows up, and what do I do? You at least need to have working knowledge. You need to have enough information to be dangerous. You don't need to be an expert at it, but you need to have enough information. And that's why, I keep thinking, product managers need to learn how to code, because vibe coding hallucinates 80% of the time. You think you built something and you really haven't. You think the feasibility of something is really simple, but you don't have context of your business. You think, I've seen this again and again, where people go like, oh, we can just prompt open API and it's gonna give us all of this information. And then what they don't know is, I'm like, we are pulling from Pinecone. This is like a RAG, function. We're going to add context engineering. That increases the scope considerably. So these small nuances a product manager cannot understand without at least having basic knowledge of how it works. So yeah, so it's bridging the gap, but I feel like that doesn't mean that product managers do not have to be technical. That means they have to be even more technical. And AI is helping them get there really quickly. A product manager who's non-technical can't just sit there and say, okay, cool, now vibe coding's there, everything's on production. No, vibe coding can't build production-ready code. You have to understand the how, even if you don't understand the syntax, but you at least have to understand how things interact with each other and what each thing does for you to truly be able to create something of consequence.
Right. Right. Yeah. The at least right now, in August 2025, the AI agents are not able to abstract as humans can on the business logic, the think problem in abstract. When you're building object-oriented programming, you build objects that represent reality, right? It's an abstraction of reality. That's something that AI cannot do very well yet. It can kind of infer it and eventually give you the behavior that you're looking for up to a certain point.
Yeah.
But then, that code is not going to scale. It's not going to work. You're not going to be able to not only scale it on usage, but also add more functionality, because it's not designed that way. Right? And that's the limitation that the AI has now.
And adding to that, it cannot figure out code complexity.
Right.
Which is insane to me, because it can just functionally and, syntactically fix things. It can fix a lot of lint errors, great. But when it comes to code complexity, and as your project becomes bigger and bigger, it becomes like it becomes sluggish and it doesn't you need to know systems design and AI can't do it. So I remember there was an function that was running at O(n) cube complexity and I'm like, what is happening? And no one knew that this is happening. And it was a vibe coded, kind of. I was like, someone simplify this, please, without cursor or open AI. Do it with your own brain. So these things AI can't do, and it's not ready to scale. But at the end of the day, that is where people cut corners. And that is what I think product managers need to understand. They need to understand how system design works. They need to understand how microservices work. They need to understand, how indexing works and how database works and what context engineering is. And why would we use RAG in this situation versus just plain prompting? These technical decisions you need to be aware of the why. It's the same way. Engineering needs to be aware of the why of product strategy, but product also has to be aware of the why behind systems design. It goes both way.
Right. And the how.
And
How it's been built.
Yeah.
And why.
Exactly. So that is the strategy of engineering, that here is how we've built it. Here is how the services are built. This is how the abstraction layer looks like. This is the database. This is when we'll use RAG for an AI thing or not. This is where we'll engineer more context versus not. A lot of the times when you're in a big data company, you're using a lot of synthetic data. This is where we'll use synthetic data versus not. These are critical decisions that product needs to be aware of and understand the why behind it, which is why barrier to entry to learning how to code and how to build these prototypes is reducing for product managers. But at the same time, the need to understand technical know-how is also increasing.
How much functional and how much technical deep do you think product owners should know?
Enough to work with an engineer to make critical decisions. I feel like I'll give you an example. We recently had this issue where we wanted to figure out if we should simply just put a prompt with a huge amount of context for we should switch an LLM with a lot of context, or do we improve our indexing on Pinecone and our embeddings on Pinecone and do a RAG kind of methodology. That's why I'm harping on RAG, because that is the thing that was top of mind. And it was a very critical decision because a lot of features would be built in the future on top of it. So product needed to be involved. And our product manager who was involved was non-technical. So they said, oh, whatever you see fit. And I was like, no, it's not an engineering decision. It's an engineering and product decision, because you don't want to go back to engineering 2 weeks later to say, oh, by the way, these 8 more features are going to be built on top of that. And then engineering is going to come back and say, we've run out of context. If you choose to just prompt, you say, we've run out of the context window. We can't add more stuff. So it is a decision for right now for you to understand that what does your roadmap look like 6 months from now? And will this one decision impact your 6 months down the line roadmap? So if you're trying to add more and more stuff to that feature, if this is it, this is the prompt and you will not change it for the next 6 months, great, just run with it. You're not going to run out of the context window. But if you add 4 more features, that means 4 more parts of context, you're going to run out of that context window, which means you need to have a vector database of some kind. So that is an important decision for product to be involved in for engineering. They can take both ways are good ways to give a response to the user. But then how does product strategy get affected 6 months from now when they have to re-engineer the entire feature because you changed your mind?
Right.
So that is the reason why I'm saying that there has to be some understanding of how things work. They don't need to know how to code it, but they need to know the pros and cons of each.
Right. Yeah, I think that we should be able to get product owners fairly quickly on the functional side, right? You don't need to understand how everything in the car works to drive it, right? So if we can understand it as black boxes, right, then we can have a better understanding of how it works and the limitations. Again, you don't need to be a specialist on system designs to know that.
Right.
And that gives you a good idea, right? And then you can split those big boxes into smaller big boxes.
Correct.
And understanding how they work together, right? And then you get deeper and deeper into more, of course, technical knowledge, right? But at least getting, to 1, 2, or 3 levels of functional understanding, right?
I think that is a basic thing that I feel I've seen a lot of product managers and product people not know. Like, they don't see a feature as a building block for your next quarter's roadmap. They see it as one thing. And even if the next feature and the next quarter's roadmap, like, is something's connected, they see it as different. However, engineers see it as all interconnected because they're like, oh, if you're building that next quarter, we need to make sure that we optimize and account for that right now. So there's a difference in the way of thinking because product thinks about the now and this is what we built. And then they're like, oh, we'll see what happens for the next feature next quarter. I mean, that's a fundamental difference in the way product versus engineering think. So that is why I know that my engineering team used to ask for the year's roadmap. And we at least had an idea, like, of course, we had this is subject to change, but we would always try to be 2 to 3 quarters ahead of engineering so that engineering has an idea of what's coming out. And then we even try to be 5 quarters ahead where the last 2 quarters were just the names of the features. We hadn't thought through anything, but at least an idea of what the next year would look like. Because we started understanding the importance of system design. So they would basically look at a ticket that we had and then look through what is coming up in the next few quarters to see if anything's connected. And do we need to bring it together in terms of just the fundamentals of this feature? Especially it was a net new feature. So we actually tried to give that to the best. Again, nothing's 100% like the PRD. But we tried to do that for engineering because we had a lot of technical PMs on our end who understood how irritating it is when you throw a new feature there which is in your mind a new feature. But they're like, dude, we could have done this last quarter and build the foundation better.
Right. Now we have to refactor and change and yeah.
And that is the biggest cause, in my opinion, of technical debt. Because then you're hacking around that feature and you're monkey patching everything. And then, it becomes suddenly it becomes this monolith that then you have to take 1 quarter to refactor and then no new features come out because your technical debt is so big that things start moving slower and everything becomes at a glacial pace. But in a lot of the times, I mean, I'll be open to admitting it. I think it's product's fault because they don't see it that way. So that is why this additional interaction and this introduction of AI can help reduce future tech debt as well.
Right. There's so much you can learn from what I call working prototype, which is basically something static that you can play with, click through.
Yeah.
And then the other part is storytelling, because if you can tell the story of, we have Maria that does this and this and that, or whoever, right? That was a great way to engage the engineering team, because now they're hearing a story, right? And now they are rooting for Maria or whoever the user may be, right? So that was helpful. Yeah. So what do you think would the role for the designer is changing with AI into the product development cycle?
I feel that now, I I read about this really interesting concept and it's called the K economy, but I feel like you can apply it everywhere. So they're imagine the letter K, and then if you break down your job is now with AI, not just, oh, I'm a data analyst, I'm a product designer, I'm a product manager. It's a series of smaller tasks. I do competitive lands. I look at the best UX solutions if I'm talking about a designer. I talk to product and communicate best practices. I talk to engineering and give them the feature requirements. And then if you look at it, out of it, the top 80%, the one that goes that way in K, will be automated by, kind of AI. And the rest of the 20% will be augmented with AI. So I feel for design, a lot of this job, which is like starting from scratch, thinking about something, would be in a huge way automated. So now the designer would start at like, instead of starting at level 0, they'll be starting at level 5, but they'll be optimizing a lot of other people's ideas as opposed to having to come up with something like, which I feel like our designers are truly enjoying. Because they, anyway, like if you think about it, they would talk to a product owner. The product owner will give them like this data dump that then they had to like figure out somehow and put it into some form that is accepted. Then they would do this 8-time iteration with product owner where they said, no, this page should be here and blah, blah, blah. Now product owner is giving them that to say, here, this is the baseline that I want. And now the designer comes in and really polishes it and makes it better and thinks about best UX practices and thinks about how the user is going to interact, think about scenarios that the product owner might have missed. As opposed to, so you're getting a second set of eyes that is making that design better, thinking about newer scenarios that the product owner might not have thought of. So you have a much more polished product at the end of the day. So I feel instead of the designer starting from ground zero, their job is to improve everyone else's work because they are the experts at it. So that is kind of how I think the designer's role would switch. Whether he's going to, like, a lot of the time now, I think in the next year or so, the designer will tell the product owner, don't even come to me if you don't have your first set of mockups. Don't
Right.
talk to me. I don't want you to tell me what it is. I want you to show me what you're thinking. And then I will take that and I will iterate and improve on it. So I think that is a much better use of a designer's time rather than continually building a new login page and continually building like, one mockup that looks like their dashboard, which they've already built like 800 times. So it's a much better use for them to optimize because that extra time can be really, like you said, like the edge cases that somebody didn't think of. The designer can think of the edge cases now as opposed to the happy paths that the product owner has already thought about.
Right. Very interesting. Yeah. So if you have to distill building products into a simple mantra, your version of this is how you build software products, what do you think that will be?
I think like the mantra for product to build is to always be learning. I think like this is the age of everything is accessible to you with one question. And the only thing that, people need to do is have those questions in your head, be curious and have a learning mindset. I think product for 10 years was kind of stagnated because there was a way of doing things. You could only prioritize based on the RICE framework or the Moscow framework or like these set frameworks. You could only write PRDs this certain way. You could only use Jira for building PRDs. Like it was so set that I think product managers just stopped learning or improving on their craft, not about the product, but just their internal learnings. But I think now is the time to be continually curious, especially about engineering, especially about the how. It's not just about the what anymore. So just always be learning something beyond product management because it's changing.
Right. Great. And what advice would you give somebody somebody new that wants to join, become a product?
Yeah, I think the biggest skill set that I think a good product person can have, and Federico, you can like attest to that, it is critical thinking. A lot of critical thinking, a lot of first principle thinking and problem solving. Your goal is to figure out and find problems that you've never seen before, but you can still break them down, like you said, the big black boxes into tiny black boxes, and then kind of open one at a time and kind of like figure out the solution to one and move on to the next. But I think a good product owner has extreme level of first principle thinking, extreme level of critical thinking and, problem solving. So it's nothing about what you can learn. It's about how you think. So you have to keep like honing yourself to be that person who's a good first principle thinker, that you throw whatever problem their way, they can come up with an innovative solution. So try to put yourself in those situations. Try to put, even if it's like think about like next products, think about Cursor, and ask yourself these questions that if I had to grow Cursor tomorrow and I was their growth PM, what would I do? And, ask yourself these questions. You have AI to validate your answers to figure out, are you going in the right direction? But you just need to continually hone that skill set and that part of your brain. And brain is like any other muscle. If you don't practice it, it doesn't kind of grow. So you just need to practice that part of your brain, which is like first principle thinking. Ask yourself these questions every day about so many different products that, if I were Figma, what would I do next? How would I grow? How would I compete with Lovable moving next? And, asking these questions makes you more aware of all these scenarios that are popping up in the world of product.
Right. Yeah. And I think something that you mentioned, I think you mentioned it, or I was thinking it, and I didn't say it, is that AI can help us. I mean, you kind of said it with the K example, right?
Mhm.
The AI can help us in a lot of time-consuming, low-complexity tasks, right? But it is still us who are leading the way and giving direction to the tool.
Correct.
So we are the ones that are still in control. So it's not like AI is going to replace us, but
Close.
it's going to augment us.
Correct. 100%. Like the people who are not using AI would be left behind for sure. But doesn't mean that AI is going to take over for us. Like a human with the right prompting techniques can take over the world.
Right. Yes. And the other thing is, and you mentioned, criteria, knowing when to use the AI and when not, right? There's some customer user research that you can do with AI that used to take a lot of effort and resources. Now you can ask, and you're going to get a lot of, good answers. But there is a limit to how much you can trust those responses, right? And being able to figure out when is the AI hallucinating or trying to make up an answer to please you, right?
Right.
So that's the critical thinking part,
Yeah.
right?
AI is
Yes.
trained to always say yes. So it's your job to be, to look at it with a certain amount of skepticism. And, but I keep telling like my team as well that just because AI is telling you something doesn't mean you don't have an opinion. Like your opinion, like pre-establish your opinion and then validate it with AI. Don't ask AI for its opinion. Like it's a very slight difference in approach, but that in itself can move mountains. That you start with an opinion and then you validate it, as opposed to having no opinion and telling AI what should my opinion be. So that's
Right.
kind of the difference.
Amazing insights. So, Saumya, we're running out of time, but I truly appreciated you being here today. I think we had a really good conversation. Any closing remarks that you would like to share?
Yeah, I'm just really excited how AI is changing the world. And I really appreciate you bringing like all of these amazing people and their insights for everybody to listen to, So thank you for the wonderful work.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for being here today.